electronic. So card transactions, internet banking, and I think nowadays where we associate everything that comes through our mobile devices as digital. So I think we don't need to spend too much time on the digital means. And I think we also saw some great examples yesterday from DC Singapore, where they made a lot of digital transitions from the traditional applications to everything online these days. So, and again, not to take anything away from the other panels yesterday and panels after us, but I did hear that this is the most anticipated panel in our industry. My first question for the panelists. What's been your company's journey of digital expansion across different functionalities, services, and geography? Where you are today and where you're headed? Why don't we start with Ryan?
Oh, thank you. Morning, guys. Maybe just a very short background. So, I've lived in China for the last.
Yeah, just a quick background. We're kind of a boutique. Sometimes we get referred to as fintechs, but the regulator looks as a non-bank financial institution, so subject to the same AML KYC that most of the partners, I guess, and the franchises would experience here. I guess the big difference, and thank you, Matt, for your presentation, because you pretty much described your business model. That was very helpful. So we're regulated as an EMI issuer in the Philippines, and but unlike I guess most EMIs, we actually own our own technology stack. So Greg referenced earlier that we built a real-time roll settlement system for the Philippine Central Bank. We do other projects on the back end, on the real pipes and tubing, if you will, of the payment system. So the next one that we'll be launching is a renminbi and a HKD to peso trading system for the Philippine dual system that the banks will then use in the Philippines. We hope to launch that next year. But in terms of our journey, I guess we're very specific because our model is really business to business. And that's why I think, Matt's earlier slides here showing the EMI issuers, the processor, and the program managers, well, we can be all three. And I guess that's one of our differentiators, because we are the processor. We own our own data centers. We built them from the ground up. And all the technology stack, the core engine, the remittance platform, card issuing system, acquiring payment gateways, reporting that comes with it, is all from there. And so our journey has been a little bit different because we also have a pure business-to-business model. So we never touch the consumer directly. And so we'll work with, as Matt alluded to earlier, in the travel sector with Philippine Airlines, for example, where we issue a prepaid travel card with them for their frequent flyers. It's multi-currency. And so in our case, that would be the program manager that Matt referred to earlier, but we would be both the EMI issuer and the processor in that setup there. And so our journey is, I guess, a little bit different. And so we focus on the travel sector, of course, which fits very well with the Diners Discover branding. The other part that I think we do a little bit different is we have a strong social development agenda and footprint in our corporate DNA. So when I guess we've been doing financial inclusion before it was a buzzword, it was a key term. And so we actually focused very narrowly on the migrant workers, overseas migrant workers. So much like Ryan here, in terms of the remittance products, we focus very much on both the Philippine and Indonesian migrant workers. We just went live in Indonesia this year, and we just closed the acquisition yesterday for Canada, where that will be kind of our first stop in North America, and then expanding into the US as well. To be able to, one, control costs and for our consumers, and especially the migrant workers, but two, also to be able to give them better granular control over their personal financial situation. So in the traditional remittance, we normally think of just going to the host country, sending, and then it ends up in the beneficiary account somewhere. And so what we'll be launching, subject to our central bank's approvals for and of course going live with our new Discover prepaid card, it will be based on disintermediating traditional remittance transaction, where we take a loan in a host country, put it onto a mobile wallet that's multi-currency, and then allow the consumer the freedom of choice to be able to trade their foreign currency or send or pay bills directly, all those types of things all from the mobile app. So it's a little bit different approach from your traditional remittance transaction that you're looking at. So we kind of split the world into receiving and sending. We look at Indonesia, of course, it's very similar to our home country, the Philippines, in terms of geography, demographics, socioeconomic development. And then we look at the sending countries, like let's say Singapore or the US, Canada, that's more where the remittances will originate. And so we have different strategies for the different types of countries, depending on our purpose for our consumers.
Okay. Thank you, Simon. Louis? It's B2B payment. So I think the second question, I think some of you guys touched on a little bit. So as leaders of very successful companies, right, you obviously spend a lot of time looking at the market, what's happening. So the second question is product specific related. Are there any specific products that you're looking at that you believe could be a game changer for your company in the next few years? And I guess a two-part question, you can answer that, or a game changer that could happen in the industry. So, Simon, would you like to start?
Sure. First off, let me congratulate you because I first met him, he was literally a startup, I think. So I guess we earned the point here already. Making me feel old sitting beside But in terms of the innovative products, let me say that I think in the next 2 to 3 years, probably we'll be focusing on a multi-currency cross-border product, whether it's for remittance or SME payment, commercial payments, travel, and the like. That's probably internally, that's going to be what we're taking to the market more and more. We see a lot more demand for it. In terms of our business model, we're kind of different. So we're B2B, as I mentioned earlier, so we don't launch a product directly without working with them in Matt's parlance or program manager. And so that kind of helps define our role. But in terms of the technology, that's certainly what we're looking at. In terms of impact to the industry, a couple of things that we're keeping a close eye on. One is Project Nexus. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. That's from the Bank of International Settlements. So that's their attempt to build a switch basically for linking up all the real-time payments. And of course that will have significant impact, I think, to our industry. All the interchange talk that Matt discussed earlier in terms of EU, I think about that in terms of competing with it globally, especially from a network perspective. I think that will be substantive in terms of the impact to us. The other thing that we're looking at very closely is open banking or open API, open finance, depending on what the regulatory framework you're looking at. Unlike the EU, the APAC, of course, is fragmented in terms of its regulatory schemes. So it's much more challenging, I think, in terms of navigating that. And so we see this different central banks are at different stages of that journey. But I think the direction is quite clear. And I think it presents both opportunities for us, I think mostly because it should level the playing field in a lot of ways against the incumbents. So if you're a fintech startup or you're more nimble or smaller maybe compared to the larger banks, then I think the open banking, open API should open up a lot of new opportunities. As OmniPay, we're on the Open Finance Oversight Committee that was organized by the central bank, and we chaired a pilot technical working group. And so we expect to be going to the market with some sort of open API, open finance product probably by next year with the central bank. Probably the last one that's kind of hairy for us, I guess, in terms of what we keep an eye out on is quantum computing. Of course, China and the US are leading the way in a lot of ways, and we may not all be aware, but quantum computing is already making an impact on the financial industry, mostly in terms of derivative pricing, portfolio optimization, and the like. But the bigger concern I have there is really the ability of quantum computers to break the classical cryptography that we all rely on today to secure our transactions. So So that's something else that we kind of keep a very close eye on.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Brian? I think now we're going to shift our focus a little bit from products to more about relationships. I think Louis just mentioned now the word partnerships, right? And that's one of the themes of our conference is networking and making new partnerships. And I think we all know we have limited resources, and one of the ways to quickly ramp up your products and services is through partnerships. So the question for the panelists is, how do you assess complementary value-add partnerships to accelerate your digital expansion plans? Louis, can we start with you?
Sure.
Actually, we are still, how do you guys look at partnerships?
I guess we look at partnerships a little bit differently, primarily because we typically own and operate our own technology. Right? When we look at fintechs, the first thing we'll look at is not so much the technology, it's actually the people. Right? If the technology looks somewhat interesting on the surface, the first filter we'll actually look at is the people. You know, is this somebody that I can do business with? Because at the end of the day, from our perspective, that fintech partner that you may be onboarding is a third-party vendor risk, right? From a financial institution perspective. And so that's really the lens that we look at first. Maybe I'm old school, but you know, I'm a firm believer in the relationship between the people behind the company. It's not just the names. It's not just a contract. That is, do we actually have a business? Much to Ryan's point earlier, do we actually have a business together? Right? And if the answer is yes, then we'll take kind of, of course, do your own due diligence on the principles behind the fintechs, right? And then of course, one of the first things that we'll also do is what happens if the partner folds. Right? Because typically the fintechs may not have the same financial stamina to be able to work with us. Especially in a highly regulated industry that we all operate in. A lot of the technology companies, you know, they have to go to Series A, B, C, D, doing their own fundraising. And if they fail, especially in these challenging times now, you know, that will kind of leave us in the lurch if they're a real partner. And so one of the things that we'll look at is how do we backfill that? If we like their technology, can we let's say, put their source code in escrow or something like that, so in case it folds, then we still have something to work with. So those are kind of the things that we look at when we.
Okay, I guess moving on to a related question, Simon, if you don't mind, we'll stay with you here. I think in the last few years, right, especially during the pandemic, we saw tremendous growth of fintech players. And I think now we're seeing more, some of them, you know, maybe no longer around, some of the consolidation in the industry. So how do you see the trend of fintech companies going forward? What's going to separate the winners from the rest?
I think, you know, much like what Luis was saying, you know, it's very turbulent times for fintechs. It's a lot harder now to raise money if you're not profitable, right? And I guess, you know, I guess I am old school that way. You know, if I can't figure out how they make money, then why are we there? Right? So typically I'll look at the value proposition of the fintechs. Right? Is there something that they make it faster, cheaper, safer, or more convenient? Right? If they can't answer any of those questions, then what's the purpose? Right? And don't get me wrong, it's not like I get it right, but I mean that's what we look at in terms of for a partnership that we would be considering. Definitely the financials will be critical. You know, we've seen a lot of cool technology that we wanted to bring on out of Israel, out of the US, Japan, but sometimes by the time we go through the vetting process, talking to the regulators, it's 2-3 years down the road, the company's gone. Right? You have nothing to work with, and so that's kind of our challenge, I guess, in terms of bringing some of that stuff to the market.
Okay. Louis, you want to take that? What do you think the trend's going to be in the next? You know, what's kind of the popular theme at the FinTech Festival today, which I haven't been to? A lot of stuff on digital currencies, right? So, last question for the panel. What is your view on central bank digital currencies? What do you think the impact is going to be to our industry in the coming years? I think Louis, I know you're eager to answer this question, so let's start with you.
Yeah, I agree with Louis that you know, CBDCs are somewhat inevitable. But I guess I have a somewhat of a more contrarian perspective because even if you look at the US dollar, we think of the US dollar as a paper banking, but let's face it, 80%, maybe even more, of the volumes of transactions conducted on US dollars is electronic already, right? So from that perspective, then what's the purpose of the CBDC? Right? I mean, maybe it's an old school in Ryan and myself, but that's kind of how we think. If it doesn't bring any value, then what's the point? Are these central banks just, is this a fear of missing out, a FOMO, right? Because they see crypto, gaining momentum, and this is kind of their regulatory response, right? In terms of coming up with a fiat version of crypto, right? Then what's the purpose? But in the Philippines, the Philippine Central Bank is, I think, planning to launch a pilot program for wholesale CBDCs probably early next year. Right? So we're kind of taking a wait and see attitude, I guess, in terms of what the central bank would want it to do. Because obviously then they have to settle amongst themselves as well for cross-border, the CBDCs, so that's going to take time as well. It's not going to be so easy. We have a Singapore CBDC, a Philippine CBDC, China CBDC, right? That point or whatever that the Federal Reserve will end up calling in the States. All of these will then have to be interoperable as well. But it's fiat, so it runs through the same pipes that, today the fiat currency runs through, which is already electronic, right? When it goes to the RTGS, it's all electronic, right? So I guess in my mind, I'm not quite convinced what the use case would be for CBDCs per se. China is, I think, a very unique situation because they want to be able to track everything, right? And that's the beauty of the DLT. But I'm not so sure that the U.S. Federal Reserve will want to do the same thing necessarily, and certainly if they want to be an international currency for trade and finance, that's not going to happen.
Okay. Ryan, anything to add there? Any
Out of time.